All right, we are 3 minutes past the hour, so why don't we get started? I'm going to get started this afternoon, and my name is Rolando Gomez, and I serve the National Association of Latino Healthcare Executives as a past chair and executive director. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for this invaluable webinar, hosted in partnership with our colleagues at WittKieffer. So I'm sure you will learn a lot from this session. I especially want to thank Dr. Isabel Pacheco, Dr. Daniel Gandaria, and Mercedes Chacon-Vance for participating in this important discussion, and also to the WittKieffer team for creating this space to convene. So I hope you enjoy the program, and with that, I turn it over to you, Mercedes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rolando, for the introduction, and thanks for having us here. Hello to everyone. Welcome to today's program on building your executive brand and beyond. I'm Mercedes Chacon-Vance. I'll be moderating and joining in on the discussion with our two distinguished panelists. Building a brand is something that every current or aspiring executive should think about, as your brand plays a key role in every advancement and success in your career. And I think it's built personally when your personal brand and your professional brand come together. I think that's where you build your successes. Before we do introductions and get started, let me share a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available soon on the NALHE and WittKieffer website if you'd like to go back and view again, or if you'd like to share it with other colleagues and professionals. At the end of the session, we'll hold a Q&A with the panelists to answer questions that you all might have. You may submit those questions at any time using the Q&A function in Zoom. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. We have people behind the scenes monitoring those for us, and we'll give those to us once we get to the point in the Q&A. All right, well, with no further ado, let's get started. So let's start with introducing our panelists. Panelists, would you like to go off and introduce yourself?
Sure.
Dr. Pacheco?
Yes, thank you, Mercedes. And thank you to all of you who are joining us here tonight. I'm Dr. Isabel Pacheco. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for the Michigan Health Information Network. I also am a board member and secretary of the board for NALHE. Happy to be here.
Great.
And thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Daniel Gandaria. I am our Chief HR Officer for Executive Services at Advocate Health. I'm also a board member for NALHE, and my responsibility at Advocate Health is really to manage the executive life cycle. So from when we recruit them, develop them, pay them, through when they separate. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about it.
Well, thanks to both of you. This will be a fun session. I think your expertise in both areas, I think will be really helpful to our group. Right now, what we'll do is go to the next slide. This is the quick agenda. Really what we want to do for everyone here listening today is really giving you an idea of how to build your brand. Really answer some of these questions. Why does personal brand matter? And how do you build it? And this panelist discussion, we're hoping we will touch on ideas from our panelists, from myself, on how we've built our brand and what advice you might have. And I'm realizing I actually didn't do a formal introduction of myself. I'm Mercedes Chacon-Vance. I'm a senior partner with WittKieffer. We're an executive retained search firm that works across all areas of healthcare, higher education, and not-for-profit. So the professionals on this panel that I'm sharing the panel with kind of bring the insider's view. From my perspective, I work with the clients to find senior executive level positions. So I'll bring the view of an executive search person. So again, excited to get going. Again, we'll go over a little bit more about what we're hoping to touch on today. Ro, if you can go to the next slide. These are a few ideas of influential people who have made their brands, and some thoughts around building that personal brand. I love this one. What people say about you when you're not in the room. And that might be the people that you work with, that might be in an interview. And I think really telling your story. You are the head marketer of you, of me. So telling your story about your life, and creating that own legend. And I think we'll touch on some things that might hold us back as we're building that brand. Ro, if you want to go to the next slide. We bring this slide up because obviously these individuals all have built significant brands in politics, in entertainment, in sports, in business. And probably looking at each one of them, you feel something. Because these individuals have done an amazing job with their brands. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, you know their faces, and you know the brand that they have built and what their representation is in the areas that they are known for. So kind of thinking along that line about how these individuals built that brand, we're hoping to give you some ideas to build your own brand professionally. So these are some of the things that we're going to touch on that our panelists will discuss. Building your brand really needs to be built around what drives you. You really have to think about what's your motivation, what's your passion, what's your mission, your personal mission, and how that all brings you joy. And I really think it comes from a professional aspect and a personal aspect. When you get that right, I think that energizes you. That will come out in your brand. And it will help you figure out where you want to take your career. And I think, again, we are going to give you some ideas from our panelists about how they've done that, and give you ideas on how you can do that. Ro? Again, some ideas on what we'll touch on, kind of a quick elevator speech. Again, how it defines you as a leader, how you kind of differentiate yourself amongst professionals in that you might be going against as you're going for a new position, as you're kind of climbing the ladder, and building those relationships. Our panelists, we've already talked about kind of the mentors and the connections that we've made to give us advice, help us strengthen our brand and our reputation. And ideas about how to continue growing and develop your knowledge and your skill set, and just continuing to develop that within yourself. And then hopefully as you build that, you will be able to develop that in others. From my perspective, that's why I love to do this, the work that I do. It really is about helping individuals kind of pull out the best in themselves and take the next level in their careers. So again, these are things that we'll be touching on about activities that we've done that have helped us build the brand that we have today. Networking, thought leadership with regard to articles, and that can be on social media, content creation on LinkedIn. Some people need to be visible on some of these other social media channels. That all kind of comes together with thought leadership. Mentorship, finding people around you who are in positions that you'd like to be in or you aspire to be, building relationships with people like me, how you do that, how you navigate that. We might not come out right into this, the core of our conversation, but things that you can ask at the end if you have questions around that. A lot of the positions that we will be working with, or individuals and professionals that in your world, volunteer and community engagement is very important. We call it the ecosystem, the way that healthcare and higher education and not-for-profit are connected. So community engagement, and then board engagement, serving on boards, building a brand that way. And then doing things like this, speaking engagements, and getting yourself out there. So we'll be talking a bit about that. All right, well, I have talked enough. I think we're ready to hear from our distinguished guests, and so we're ready for discussion. And we'll come to full screen so you can see these great colleagues. So I have a few questions. We're going to go about 20 to 25 minutes kind of talking about these questions, letting our panelists answer them. And then we'll be able to spend the last about 15 minutes with the audience Q&A. So again, please feel free to send those in even now. Again, we will have our behind the scenes people giving those to us at about the 40 to 45 minute time. So I'm ready to get going. So we will start with the first question to get the panelists' thoughts on what's your definition of a brand from the seats that you sit in your world. How do you define brand? And then after we have a little discussion around that, how did you build your brand? Give us examples. Dr. Pacheco, would you like to begin? And please feel free to jump in. Don't feel for like I need to call on you either. I want to make this a good discussion.
No problem. Thanks, Mercedes. Thanks for setting us up with so well. So I thought a lot about this question about what is my definition of your brand, right? Of an executive brand. And I think what it really comes down to is pretty simple. It's the way you present yourself professionally and how others perceive you. I think that's what it comes down to for me. Daniel, how about yours?
I was going to say the same in different words. So we were down the same path. It's really how you show up, right? It doesn't matter what you say about yourself. It's how you end up showing up day to day that other people would describe you as. So.
Yeah, Mercedes, I think the quote that you shared in the beginning from Jeff Bezos was right on target. It's also about what other people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah, and tell us about how you've done that within your own brand. I mean, what really stands out to either one of you about how you feel like you've been able to do that and it's helped you professionally to get where you are today?
Do you want to start, Dr. Pacheco? You want to go?
Sure. So I think for me, one of the things is I really make a concerted effort to remain focused and consistent. So within each leadership position that I've been in, one thing that has remained consistent is that I'm firm but fair. And I think any staff member who's worked with me will say that. And I'm always interested in improving processes, operations. That's kind of my niche. And so in every position I've been in, those are the consistencies. And I think people see that. I'm also very careful about the promises I make to others because I firmly believe in doing what you say you're going to do. And if there's something that is out of my control or not in my ability, I just don't promise it. And I think people have come to know that about me as well. Leaders, colleagues, staff, people generally that I have come across, and even in my personal life, I do what I say I'm going to do. I remain consistent in that. And I won't promise it to you if I know I can't control the outcome. So I think that's part of how I've built my brand.
Great. That's really good. I'll go a different direction. And I think I've been fortunate to have been in different types of roles in different industries. And I think you try on like a lot of different hats to see what works. I remember one of my first roles, I showed up and I was told I had to do something. So I just went out there and said, hey, I've been told I have to do this. I'm going to get it done. And I was just telling people I had to be done. It wasn't really who I was, but I felt like I had to do it. It didn't work. And it was kind of embarrassing when, the whole plan I put in place fell apart. I'll never forget, but you learn from those things, right? I think that's what's really important. And so I think for me, people would probably just say I'm authentic. I'm like, whoever I am, that's who I am. And I show up as, because however you describe me and I'm coming across here, I bet you my family would tell, yeah, he's the same way. I think that's what I've basically learned is if you have to try to force something, you say, hey, I'm going to be the smartest, and you're not. it's not your thing, then don't be that, right? Just show up how you are. Maybe you're the kindest. Well, be the kindest person, right? And then you got to find a fit, right? Where does that really work for you, and play to your strengths in there? Because again, I got more stories than just that small one of it didn't work out when I was trying on different hats. So I just learned just be myself, and that's what I hope people would come across, say that he's really authentic.
Yeah.
I think you bring up two really good points with regard to authenticity and also failure. You're not going to get it right every single time. And I think that, when I think about the brand that I have created over the 20 plus years that I've been doing search, I think a lot of times what we think is, or at least I did, was if I could be more like this person, or I had, the articulation and the way that I speak. But I really feel like once I realized I don't need to be anybody else but myself, and because that's going to show through. And I think that for me was a game changer in my brand, is realizing that just being authentic and just being me, really was okay. And the professional experience that I had built over the years, I felt more and more confident in that. And Dr. Pacheco, you and I discussed this a little bit. I'll go on to kind of a little bit more. I think one thing that can hold back, I think our culture, the Hispanic and Latino and Latina culture, is that we tend to be humble. We come from humble families. I'm a first generation, very hardworking people, but you don't brag, and you're not boastful about yourself. So I'd love to get your take on that, because I feel like that is something that I've had to overcome and really be confident in my career and my profession. I'd love to hear from, I think Dr. Pacheco, we had talked about that a bit, but either one of you, please, let me know what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mercedes. We come from a culture where we shy away from boasting about our accomplishments, but humility and modesty aren't really rewarded in the corporate world, right? That's not really a part of what skill set other leaders look for in a leader. We talked a little bit about this too before, Mercedes. I have an incredible mentor who happens to be my boss. The CEO of my organization has really, he tells me, I want to make sure that you are introducing yourself as Dr. Isabel Pacheco, and I want to make sure we're highlighting your skill set. You are such a great leader in our organization, and I want others to see how great you are. So having that encouragement to put out there what my accomplishments are, who I am as a leader, what I bring to the table, and that it's almost like permission to do it, right? Because you don't want to seem boastful, and culturally you have that in the back of your mind. You don't want to sound boastful, you want to be modest, and but when you have others encouraging you and notice those skill sets in you, you're able to do it much more freely. So I would definitely encourage those who are listening in tonight. There's a difference between being boastful, but also being honest and honoring your accomplishments because you've worked hard for them. So there's really nothing wrong with that. There's a time and a place for sure.
That's true. I give you a story. I like to tell stories. I'll never forget. So I graduated from college. I got a master's degree, and I was trying to pack something. And I'm trying to build off of Isabel's or Dr. Pacheco. Sorry, I got it. Dr. Pacheco's comment there about it not being a wise thing to do to be too forward in your accomplishments. I was just so excited, and I was doing something. I was trying to pack something, and my tia Cello comes up, and I couldn't figure this thing out, and I get it packed in the car, right? And she goes, oh, now you're smart, people stupid. That's what she told me, right? And it like brought me to, it like humbled me a little bit, and that I thought I was on top of the world. why I say that is back to your point, Dr. Pacheco, of like, you don't in Latino culture, you're not necessarily rewarded for being, hey, I just graduated, guys. I'm the smartest one. Here's this, it's, she brought me down so fast, and it was my big day and everything. I'll never forget it. Right. And I think sometimes I think about that before I will post something. Like if I don't like to post on LinkedIn. We've talked about this. Like, I just wonder, oh man, is she going to tell me now you're just being smart people stupid on this thing? Like, so it sticks in my head. And so we just have to break out of that. Right. That's the thing. Back to, you're rewarded for sharing those kinds of things where maybe it's not culturally kind of the way that you grew up.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think it was interesting to have these conversations before and realize, hey, that is right. And that plays in to our brand. Again, I think going back to the quotes, to the individuals that we saw on those in those pictures. I mean, I'm sure those people have had hardships and thought, oh my gosh, am I really doing this? But I think if you really believe in what you're in yourself and your skill set, you're not boasting. You're really speaking truth to, and you are the number one seller of you. And especially when you're looking to build yourself and move into the next. I mean, both of you got advanced degrees because you wanted to move up, and you really, and so I think this conversation, this piece of the conversation, I've done this a lot, was a kind of an eye-opening kind of information that I am like, yeah, that is right. From your perspective, what else are there other unique challenges that you think our culture, Hispanic and Latinas have in building their brand? Have you seen that within yourself? Any stories that you have, or any mentors, or anything that you've seen within your career?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, Mercedes, I think we should acknowledge that Latino representation in senior leadership and in the boardroom here in the US is only about 4%, an even smaller number for healthcare. And it's increasingly difficult for Latinos to reach this pillar of leadership. But it's my hope that with the spotlight on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that it'll help move this statistic toward a more upward trajectory. So I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge that for Latinos especially, it's been really hard for us to achieve that pillar of leadership. I think that non-Latinos tend to see Latinos mainly serving in labor occupations. And so there aren't enough Latinos in senior leadership positions yet to change that mindset. So the bias remains, right? And so you just being cognizant of that, I feel a tremendous responsibility to mentor and guide other professionals into leadership positions. And I find myself becoming an ally for mainly that reason. I want to make sure that, I've gotten to a position where I'm very fortunate that I've had allies help me get into the positions that I've been in, along with my education, hard work, etc. But I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility to bring those leaders into positions, or bring, people who aren't in leadership and aspire to be into those positions of leadership, and be a mentor and an ally for them as well.
You got a clapping there with from that comment. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I just say, I mean, the same. So when, part of my role is we have to go to search and partner with individuals like you, WittKieffer, to find diverse talent, and it's tough, right? Especially because I think some of it is about being given opportunities to get the same experiences, because it may not be pure talent, but it's, hey, someone got a chance to do these types of things. And so what we've really been focused on is, I think, what Dr. Pacheco is referring to is like true sponsorship. Like, how do you sponsor somebody, and help them break through some barriers, right, that they may have. I was fortunate to have a sponsor that really stepped up for me and said, "Hey, I believe you can do this. I want you to do these things," and gave me the opportunity. So when it came time to interview for a position, I had experiences that I could describe, right, that were similar to others. And I think that's probably where we need to focus. Is it doesn't matter, whether you're Latino, Latina, Hispanic. If you can find somebody that was willing to say, "Hey, I've got some things, and I believe that you've got the talent, and here's how I could use you to lean into that type of relationship." Doesn't matter race, ethnicity, or anything like that. That's what we really need to level the playing field, is experience.
Dr. Gandara, you have really kind of touched on two things again for me. First is continuing to find mentors, whether they're bosses or colleagues, people that maybe you aspire to be, is so important. I had a very similar experience. I'm first generation. All of my family are extremely hardworking. I'm the youngest of 8, very hardworking, work in humble jobs. And, for me, I didn't have anyone that really was in the professional world. And I met my mentor, and I started as her administrative assistant. And I always say she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And it really opened my eyes and really opened my world in ways that I really had never thought about. I had dreamt about possibly being in business and having a job that I could help people and mentor people. And I ended up meeting that kind of person that saw that in me. And so I think building a brand is also keeping your eyes open for individuals that are going to help you grow and continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I think you're right, whether that it is, if you're in a certain culture, I think it's for anyone looking to build themselves. But I had that same same thing that happened to me, and as I grew as a professional. The other point that I thought was really interesting, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, is how have you seen, what do you think your person, your mentor, what do you think, how did they build your confidence that helped you build your brand, but helped you have the encouragement to take the next steps in your career? Dr. Gandara,
Oh, that's for me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at Dr. Pacheco. She's got the best answers. I'm just.
No, I can certainly take it, because I have something already as soon as she was asking. Sure.
Yeah, if you want to start, Dr. Pacheco, you go right ahead, whichever, we're open.
For sure. I think that having a mentor that allows you enough autonomy to do what's being asked of you, and giving you some authority. I think there's nothing more powerful than the mix of those two things. And I have to say that that's kind of how you build leaders. You see people working hard, and you, as a leader, over time, you start to pick up on things that folks are capable of that they themselves may not think they are, but you've seen them working long enough to know this person's got what it takes, right? You can pick that up once you've been a tenured leader for a while. You can kind of pick that up in folks. and you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence, of course, but giving them things to work on and allowing them enough autonomy to be able to do these things in a way that they know how to get them done, and giving them a little bit of authority that goes with it, you would be amazed on how people flourish with that. And I think that I experienced that in a few times in my life and over my career, where I was given that big project. I was scared. I wasn't sure I had all the skill sets. And as women, we don't take things we don't think we can do 100%, right? We don't say, oh, I'll look that up or I'll research that. We have to know from A to Z, you have everything in your repertoire that you need to be able to do the job. But I took the assignments and I did the work. And as long as I was given the authority to do it the way I knew how to do it, still had the same outcome they expected, was given a little bit of authority, I did well. And I think other people I have seen flourish in that environment.
Yep,
So.
I had the same. The one piece that I also, I'm sure you got this, that I also got was, and sometimes I still feel like he's my biggest critic, right? I mean, like, I'm like, oh man, you're on me about this, but it's for a reason. And so, because yeah, it's been, hey, here's this project, I want you to do X, and I'm running, I think I'm doing well, and it is, and then I'm getting picked at on some of these things, which is I know why, because it's trying to make sure that it's don't forget this. I know you got that, but here's where you need to work, right? So that has been, to me, probably the most helpful, because it's a trust relationship there, right? That I know I've been given the autonomy. I know I got to get it done. He knows I'm going to get it done, but then it's, making sure that I'm accomplishing it, but not just accomplishing it, but learning from it, and kind of being forced to reflect on that type of thing. So it's been that's been tremendously helpful. And then the maybe it's good or bad, but I think that's what I've ended up doing with other people, right? Is it's, hey, I want to give you this opportunity, but just know I'm going to give you some feedback along the way on it too, which may not feel all that good all the time, but the real intent is to make sure that that you're getting better every time, and it forces that reflection. So
yeah, that's excellent advice. Kind of shifting this a little bit, and we talked a little bit about failures, right? About things that maybe didn't go quite as you would hoped, and in the moment it's really painful. And just as you talked about giving the feedback, can you give advice on when your brand has taken a bit of a hit? When maybe you there's a couple of ways here, either kind of a personal or a professional hit where you didn't kind of do things maybe the way that they could have or should have been. And then the other kind of what can diminish a brand is maybe a change, maybe you didn't stay in that job that you thought you were going to stay in. And that can kind of hurt your brand. That can kind of hurt you. Can you give advice about how to repair and bounce back from one of, that kind of, I don't want to say damage, but bump in the road as you're building your brand?
Yeah.
Anyone like to start?
that's honestly, it's a really tough one, because it's emotional, right? And there, and that, first I would say, while people have brands, I feel like a lot of times there's a little bit of leniency in that a lot of people will give individuals some grace. So while you do think it's really bad on some things, it may not be as bad as you really think. So the first thing, when I've ended up doing something, I go, yeah, probably it's not the way I would have wanted to come across or to do, is to go check, right? To go ask, to go talk to somebody and say, hey, I didn't, want for that to come across that way, or yeah, how do that? What do you think? And if you've got some key colleagues, a cabinet, if you will, people that you put around you, you can ask those kinds of questions, and they'll tell you that. I think that's the quickest way, is they'll say, yeah, this is how it came across. What probably, would make it better is, and I mean, I think that there's some ways to do that, but you're going to have to go find out and ask, which a lot of times is a little bit uncomfortable. Because you're finding out information that but you might not want to hear. So that's what I've done, is just go ask a handful of people about perspectives, especially if I know that they'll tell me the truth, right? And then to be able to take some actions based on that, which could be, I just got to go apologize to somebody, right? So anyway, that's my perspective on it.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco?
Sure. I piggybacking on Dr. Gandaria, I think you have to have those colleagues that you know and trust, and the ones that will actually be true to you and tell you what you should hear and not necessarily what you want to hear. So that's important. But there's so many things that can diminish your brand. But I think what it comes down to is core values. You as a person, knowing them, living them, believing them. And if there is a situation you find yourself in where you think you may have done something to diminish your brand, it's likely because you've done something that's against your core values. So you can innately feel it. You can feel when something didn't go quite right. And as far as repairing, I don't necessarily think it's the failure that defines you. I think it's how you manage it and overcome it. So take accountability, apologize if you have to, commit to learning from the experience, build on relationships, help repair them if you have to, stay focused on your goals and stay true to your core values. I think if you constantly remind yourself before you take an action, whoa, is this going to go against what I value? And then you become inauthentic, and people can smell inauthenticity a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute you start to disguise who you really are and try to mimic another person's style, you come to a crossroads where, oh, I did this because I think that's what they would have done, but then what? What's my next move, right? If you're not authentic, you're always looking for what should I do next, and you kind of start to come up empty-handed. And so authenticity is important.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing in there? I mean, I think you're so right in that if you've been yourself and you make a mistake, people will give you plenty of grace. It's when, when's your brand damaged? Well, when you come out of the gate acting one way and then you're changing all the time, then they're like, well, I don't know who this person is. So I think if you make enough to that point, that's why I struggle with that in the beginning, enough like trust deposits, right? You build these things up, but then when people are forgiving, right? They'll forgive that. So
Sure. You have to be consistent. Yeah.
That's right.
Excellent. Great. We have about 5 minutes or 4 minutes in this discussion. I'll kind of end with this kind of question, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Brand building activities. What have you done, and any stories that you might have? We had the list before of 8, networking, thought leadership, volunteer and community engagement. What do you feel when you think about it, and from each one of your perspectives, what do you think were the most important brand building activities that you did that helped you, kind of achieve the things that you were looking to achieve and kind of get you where you are today?
Yeah, I would say that one of my major and most accomplishments that I'm most proud of is education. So having an advanced degree is something that I was personally aspiring for. So that I think also helped me build my brand. It being involved with NALHE. I mean, NALHE has been a really big partner for me in helping me build my brand and who I am as an executive, as a leader, and have allowed me opportunities to be in places that I otherwise may not have reached. And social media is one that is a little uncomfortable for me. I think for me, and it could be because it's cultural still, and I'm being too modest, right? But I think that for me, the extent of social media personally is I keep my profile up to date. I might share relevant content, but I absolutely stay away from inflammatory information on my page. I don't respond to it. I don't participate in it. I definitely don't post it. So keeping away from that kind of also is a part of who I am as a brand, is that that's not something that I value, so I don't participate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
Dr. Gandara?
yeah, I think for me, it's been, there was a phase where I was trying to get as many speaking events as I could, right? If I had a topic to share, so I'd be able to talk about some of the innovative stuff we were doing. I was pushing and trying to pushing the team, trying to get some things accomplished, and so we'd be able to go share, and we did, right? I think part of it then was to get recognized. We also not just speaking, but we pursued some awards, right, as a team that we'd be able to be associated with, whether it was best place to work or whatever it may be, and so that we'd be able to say, hey, we achieved that, and then we could be associated with that. I think that the other one that I just it's usually really important, because in healthcare, it's such a small network, right? I mean, it's big country, small network. You see running the same people, but everybody talks. And so like if you find that, hey, if you work hard one place and people know that, you find out, oh yeah, I was talking to them about you, and you just find out that there's this informal network of connections that you end up being a part of just by showing up and kind of doing your best every day. So that's kind of been the one I don't rely on, but it's probably been the most effective, right? Is you just realize how many people know other people, and when you meet someone and start asking about them, what people will say about you, that's really good, right? If you show up and do your best every day. So
Great advice. And I'll touch on social media because doing the work that I do have a big LinkedIn presence, and what's so interesting is our firm is, I think they are really pushing us now, but it is something that I've actually done for a really long time. And it's more around posting jobs, obviously, but then responding to people that have gotten promotions, articles that they have written, and I keep LinkedIn completely professional. I think Dr. Pacheco, you are completely right. If I start getting anything, I kind of will unfriend that person and I will take them off. But it really is, I will tell you that we use it as an executive search firm that is hired by clients, but clients are using LinkedIn so much more to hire a lot of their internal positions, and so being active, showing that you are there, responsive to posts that might mention you or people that might ping you. That is, we are seeing that, because I do think we are moving into a different generation of professionals that are coming into leadership positions that have grown up with social media. So I would suggest that it is something for professionals as they're moving along, especially if they are looking to move up in their career, is to get more comfortable with the social media. And as Dr. Gandara said, you have to do what feels comfortable for you. Too much is too much. If you're just like as we talked about being authentic in the way that you interact, if you're putting too much, it's going to show. So just doing it in the appropriate manner. So well, great. I mean, we've gone through all of our top topics. We're at about the time for the Q&A. Thank you both for such insightful discussions. Right now, what we'll do is turn it to some of the questions that were submitted by our audience. And I think we have some really good questions in here. One question we got from an audience member was, when was the first time you really knew that your professional brand was aiding you in your career aspirations? Is there at one point where it was a turning point? I know, Dr. Pacheco, you talked about your education. I don't know if there was anything, or Dr. Gandiata, is there something that you could point to?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I remember that aha moment was, so I had a transition in leadership. So the person that was my boss left, and there was someone new coming in, and within the first 2 days we sat down, and she basically told me, I've already heard all about you. I've heard all the good things about you. Like, here's what I already know from other people, right? And it was exactly how I would want to be described. And that was the first time when I probably just put together 2 and 2 that, okay, like, this really means something. And so then I've stuck to that from then on, right? Haven't veered course. So that was when I stopped trying different things and just started doing what worked for me.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that are coming to my mind. I think really when you have, I think when I felt like the aha moment where, what I'm doing is really working for me. I'm being consistent. I'm working hard, and people see that I have this niche for, improving efficiencies and processes, et cetera. So keeping that and always doing that, it's kind of who I am. It's what I enjoy. And being authentic to that kind of paid off when there was a role that other leaders in the organization were up for, and I wasn't quite at that pillar of that leadership level at that time. But folks kept encouraging me, you should really try for this position. I think you do well. And I did. And I got it. And that's when I knew that I was performing at a higher level and people were noticing. So I really, that was the aha moment for me.
Great. There's a question, and this is particular for both of you. How much of your personal brand did you build, do you think, while you were in graduate school versus your career?
Well, mine is probably a unique situation because I was doing both at the same time. I went to school later. I had a family, and then I went to school after, right? So I think for me, I was building both at the same time. So that I'm in a very unique situation there, but maybe Dr. Gandaria has a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because that makes sense. So to me, I would say it, it's when you're probably in the workplace is where, like, you're going to really establish. You can establish it outside for sure, depending on what your brand is going to be. If it's to, again, maybe you're in graduate school, you want to position yourself in a specific way, that's when you can start doing that. I think it's when you hit the workplace, though, that you start to see how that plays out. So for me, it's really been in the workplace, and not in graduate school. I mean, because I think the same people that I would see in graduate school, I don't see anymore. So whatever they think of me is probably like 10 years old now. So that was in one of the other iterations. So.
Well, I think you might have touched on it too earlier, Mercedes, is while you're in grad school, connecting with the community and building your brand in your community and the things that you involve yourself in. I think that's probably one of the best ways during the time when you are in grad school to start building your brand, because when you're involved in those community activities, you make connections there who could potentially be professional connections and into your career. So I think community involvement would probably be a good resource there.
And I think being a part of this association, that's building a community.
Absolutely.
I think this is a really interesting question. there's a question, do you ever have to spend money to build your brand, and can you build a solid personal brand without spending a penny? From my professional opinion, I don't believe you need to spend money. I am I review resumes and CVs every day. And you would be surprised how many people will send me a resume. And I'll give you a good example. Dr. Pacheco, let's use your example that you went back to, you went back to school after, being, having a family. Sometimes when you pay professional resume writers, they might encourage you not to put what you did before you were in your profession. That's a really bad idea, because it leaves people wondering, what did you do for, 15 years after you got out of your undergrad? That you want to, I think, in this conversation, everything that we've done tells the story of the professional we are today. And when you don't present yourself that way, it leaves people wondering, and they're going to fill it in the way they want to. So from my perspective, you can build a solid personal brand by the tips that this panel has given you, by mentorship, by building community, by doing great work, by taking, the hard conversations, and continuing to build that, and doing all these other things, those networking activities on top of that. So that's my perspective. I don't know if our panelists have a different perspective. That's my professional opinion as a professional executive search person.
I think that's great advice, Mercedes. It really is. I think many of us don't realize that matters.
Yeah, I think we should just cut that line. That's the webinar right there. What you just said, that's it. In like one sentence. That was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, my mentor said to me, this was a really good line that my mentor said to me: the person that tells the best story in their interview, as you said, I think as we started, Dr. Ganda, is that you tell the story. You like to tell stories, and all of our experience collectively as you get older is telling a story. And I think that's the best way to build your brand. So we're at about 5 of, so I think that we are at a point where we need to wrap up. I want to thank both of our panelists today for joining us. I will actually stop for a minute and see if there are any parting words you'd like to give our audience before we say goodbye.
I'll just say thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope that you took away some of our, tips and tricks and lessons, and can use them in your own career, and wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for having me, Mercedes.
Thank you. And I'd love to, at some point, I don't know how we get to hear, like, I'm sure other people have great ideas. I'd love to crowdsource some other ideas that we didn't get to hear. So if anything came through, I'd love to see what came through from other people too.
Well, thank you so much, for sharing your stories, for really being authentic and giving this group just some great tips. Thanks to everyone in the audience for taking time to listen, spending your evening doing this with us. I hope you just enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. I think this was great. And just before we leave, just to let you know, the annual conference is coming up. The Leadership Summit next month in Seattle. We, as WittKieffer, are a proud partner to sponsor the event. And we're going to be sponsoring a Summit Career Lounge, where we'll be able to provide opportunities to maybe go over your CV, some of the things I just talked about, career advice. My favorite thing to do, this is the favorite thing for me to do. I believe that the NALHE team will be sending out information in the coming week on more information on that, and more information for even one-on-ones. We're going to have a big WittKieffer group, and I'm going to fly from Maine to Seattle just to be there. I can't wait to get to see all of you there. So we're hoping that you can make the summit. And my colleagues at WittKieffer are excited to meet with you. We hope to see you there. We thank you for your time, and we hope you have a great rest of your day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be.
And can I just say in closing, Mercedes, if any of you attend and you see me, and I'm sure Dr. Gandaria will also agree, if you see us and recognize us from this panel, feel free to talk to us. We're approachable. That's part of my brand. I'm happy to answer questions or talk to you. So don't be shy about tapping me on my shoulder.
And I'll actually ask Ro to put up the final slide, and that will give actually our email address. Ro, if you're there as we're closing out, I think that final slide will have all three of our email addresses. So are you both attending the summit?
Yes.
I will be there.
Wonderful. And here we are. Here are all three of our email addresses. So please, be in touch, and we'd love to get coffee, and we will have a little career lounge. So I'll be in there, and I love to talk to everybody. So please come up and say hello. Well, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Ro, for having us. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.